The massive transport ship hummed quietly as it approached the green planet below. Inside the examination bay, dozens of alien students from across the galaxy checked their basic survival kits one final time. This was it, the legendary survival Protocol 7 examination that separated Academy graduates from Academy failures. Minho Park sat calmly on his assigned bench, watching his fellow students pace nervously around the room. The tall, spider-like arachnids clicked their mandibles in worry. The floating gas bag errands pulsed different colors as their anxiety levels rose. Even the confident rock people from the Titan colonies seemed unusually quiet today. "Attention all candidates," the mechanical voice announced through the ship's speakers. "Survival Protocol 7 will commence in 10 minutes. You will be divided in 2 mixed species teams and transported to random locations on planet Kepler-4 to see. You have exactly 72 hours to survive using only the basic tools provided. Any team member who triggers their emergency beacon will result in immediate failure for the entire team." Minho stretched his arms and rolled his shoulders. Around him, students whispered prayers in a dozen different languages. Some had trained for years in simulation chambers. Others came from species that had never seen a natural forest in their entire evolutionary history. The human smiled quietly. To himself, his grandfather would have found this amusing. "Team assignments now displaying," the voice continued. A holographic list appeared in the center of the room. Minho found his name quickly, Team 7, along with 2 names he didn't recognize. A crystalline being approached him, their body reflecting the chamber's lights like a living prism. "I am Kexara, of the Vega mining colonies," they said in perfectly translated Standard Galactic. "You must be the human. I have studied your species profile extensively." "Nice to meet you," Minho replied. "Just call me Minho." Their third teammate arrived moments later, a sleek, dolphin-like creature in a mobility suit filled with water. "I am Borisevan from the Cetacean Deep Worlds," she announced through her suit's speaker system. "I have prepared for this examination through intensive environmental adaptation training." Minho nodded politely. These were good teammates. Kexara could process minerals directly for energy, and Borisevan probably had excellent spatial awareness from her aquatic background, but he could already see the concern in their eyes. Neither had ever dealt with an actual wilderness before. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the viewing ports, Minho could see endless forests stretching to the horizon. The trees looked similar to earth oaks and pines, though the leaves showed strange purple undertones. "It would do nicely. All teams report to transport chambers," the announcement continued. "Remember basic survival tools only. No advanced technology. No communication devices, except emergency beacons. Survival ends when the 72-hour timer expires, or when any team member activates their beacon." The 3 teammates entered Transport Chamber 7, along with their assigned survival kit. Minho opened it quickly. A basic knife, multi-tool, fire starter, small rope coil, water purification tablets, and 1 emergency ration per person. Standard Academy survival gear, enough to keep someone alive for 3 days, if they were careful. The statistical probability of success with such limited resources is concerning, Kexara observed, their crystalline structure chiming softly with worry. "My species typically requires mineral-rich environments and stable temperature conditions. I will need frequent access to water sources," Borisevan added. "My mobility suit can sustain me for 18 hours maximum between refills." Minho hefted the small pack and grinned. "Don't worry, we'll be fine." The transport chamber began to glow as the teleportation system activated. Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see other teams materializing in different locations across the planet's surface. Some appeared in grasslands, others near rivers or mountain bases. Minho watched the random selection process with interest. "Transport in 10 seconds, the mechanical voice announced. Good luck, candidates. The world dissolved into white light. When Minho's vision cleared, they stood in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. The air smelled fresh and clean, with hints of pine and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, he could hear the sound of running water. Birds called from the canopy above, and small creatures rustled through the underbrush. Kexera immediately began scanning the soil composition with their built-in sensors. Bora-7 activated her suit's environmental analysis system, searching for water sources and potential threats. Minho just stood quietly, taking it all in. The forest was beautiful, dense and green and alive. His grandfather had taught him to read places like this, to see not just trees and dirt, but resources and opportunities and potential. The mineral content here is adequate, Kexera reported, though humidity levels may cause structural stress to my crystalline matrix. I detect a freshwater stream approximately 200 meters northwest, Bora-7 announced. No immediate environmental hazards, though my databases lack complete information about this planet's ecosystem. Minho nodded absently, his eyes already moving from tree to tree, noting species and sizes and the perfect spacing between several massive oaks. His teammates expected him to start gathering firewood or looking for shelter materials. Instead, he walked over to the largest oak and placed his hand against its bark, looking up into the strong branches above. "What are you planning, human Minho?" Kexera asked curiously. Minho smiled, pulling out his knife to mark the tree. "Something my grandfather would be proud of." The first few hours revealed everything about how different species approached survival. Across the forest, Team 3 struggled with their fire starter, creating more smoke than flame. Team 5 had found shelter under a rocky overhang but spent most of their time arguing about water rationing. Team 12 had built what looked like a small fort, but it was already leaking from the morning's light rain. Minho moved through the forest like he belonged there. While his teammates watched nervously, he knelt beside the stream Bora-7 had detected, studying the muddy banks with careful attention. "These are good signs," he said, pointing to various tracks pressed into the soft earth. "Deer came here too. Drink early this morning. See how the hoof prints are still sharp, and these smaller tracks belong to forest birds. When animals drink from water regularly, it means it's safe." Kexera's crystalline body chimed softly as they processed this information. "Your species maintains extensive databases about animal behavior patterns." "Not databases," Minho laughed, cupping water in his hands to examine its clarity. "My grandfather taught me camping when I was young. Humans learn this stuff naturally." He began gathering stones of different sizes from the stream. "We've been reading signs like this for thousands of years." While other teams boiled their water using precious fuel from their fire starters, Minho constructed a simple filtration system. He layered sand, small stones, and chunks of charcoal in a hollowed piece of bark, creating a natural filter that would clean water without wasting energy. "The engineering is surprisingly effective," Bora-7 observed from her mobility suit, "though I do not understand how you determined the optimal layer ratios without computational assistance." "Trial and error over generations," Minho replied, testing the filtered water. "Humans share knowledge. What works gets passed down, what doesn't gets forgotten." But water was just the beginning. While his teammates assumed he would start building a basic lean-to, like the survival manuals recommended, Minho began doing something completely different. He walked from tree to tree, marking certain ones with his knife while ignoring others entirely. "What is your selection criteria?" Kexera asked, genuinely puzzled. "These trees appear identical to my sensors." Minho ran his hand along the bark of a massive oak, looking up into its strong, spreading branches. "This one's perfect. Good solid trunk, branches at the right height and angle. The wood grain runs straight. See these lines? That means it's strong and won't split easily." He moved to another tree about 20 feet away, examining it with the same careful attention. And this one will be the second anchor point. The distance is right, and look how the branches interlock up there. Natural support system, Barusa. Suit translated her clicks of confusion. Anchor points for what purpose? Something better than sleeping on the ground, Minho said with a grin. By midday, other teams had managed basic survival tasks. They had small fires, simple shelters, and were carefully rationing their emergency food. Most looked tired and worried, constantly checking their emergency beacons and wondering if 3 days was too long to endure. Team 7's clearing looked entirely different. Minho had begun what could only be described as construction work. Using his knife and multi-tool, he shaped pieces of wood with precision that amazed his teammates. Each cut was deliberate and exact. He carved notches and joints that fit together perfectly, creating connections stronger than any rope or metal fastener. The Academy's survival protocols never mentioned woodworking, Kexara observed, watching Minho craft what appeared to be a wooden beam. How do you visualize these three-dimensional relationships without computer modeling? Humans are good with spatial stuff, Minho explained, measuring distances with his eye alone. We built houses and bridges and pyramids long before we had computers. It's just something we picked up along the way. His teammates tried to help where they could. Kexara's geological knowledge proved useful for identifying the strongest wood types, while Boroseven's understanding of fluid dynamics helped Minho plan for rain drainage. But mostly they watched in fascination as their human teammate did things that seemed impossible with such basic tools. The monitoring drones are maintaining constant observation, Boroseven reported, tracking the Academy's surveillance signals. Faculty communications indicate significant interest in our activities. Above them, Minho's project began taking shape among the oak branches. What had started as simple tree selection was becoming something unprecedented. He wove flexible branches into walls, engineered joints that would bear weight, and created a framework that seemed to defy basic survival logic. Other teams occasionally glimpsed Team 7 through the forest. They saw smoke from a well-maintained fire, heard sounds of active construction, and caught glimpses of what looked like actual building work happening in the trees. Are they allowed to do that? Whispered a Martian student from Team 9, watching Minho haul another shaped beam up into the branches. The rules only specify basic survival, replied their teammate. Nothing says we cannot improve our situation. But none of the other teams even attempted to match what the human was doing. Their species had evolved in controlled environments, adapted to specific conditions, learned to endure hardship rather than overcome it. Minho worked steadily as the afternoon sun slanted through the forest canopy. This was what humans did. They looked at problems and created solutions. They saw environments not as challenges to survive, but as raw materials to transform. His grandfather would definitely approve. By the end of the first day, the differences between teams had become impossible to ignore. Most student groups huddled around small fires, nervously eating tiny portions of their emergency rations while trying to stay dry under makeshift shelters that leaked whenever the wind changed direction. Team 7's clearing looked like something from a different planet entirely. Minho worked with the focused intensity of someone who had found his element. The basic knife and multi-tool in his hands moved like precision instruments, shaping wood, with cuts so clean they seemed machine-made. He had identified not just any trees, but specific types of wood for specific purposes. Harder oak for load-bearing beams, flexible willow for joints that needed to bend, pine for lighter framework pieces. The mathematical precision is remarkable, Kexara observed, their crystalline structure reflecting the firelight as they watched. Minho crafted another perfect mortise and tenon joint. Each connection fits with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. How do you calculate these measurements without instruments? Minho paused in his work, wiping sweat from his forehead. I don't calculate them. I just ... see how they should fit. He held up 2 pieces of wood, one with a carefully carved projection, the other with a matching slot. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. Your hands learn to know what's right. The joints slid together with a satisfying click, creating a connection stronger than rope or metal. Minho had already completed dozens of similar joints, each one custom fit for its specific purpose. In the growing structure above them, Bora-7 monitored communications while helping where she could. Academy instructors are requesting detailed analysis of your construction methods, she reported. They appear unable to classify what you are building within known survival categories. That's because they're thinking too small, Minho replied, hauling another beam up into the trees, using a rope hand pulley system he had created from braided plant fibers. Survival isn't just about lasting 3 days, it's about thriving. The pulley system itself was a marvel of improvised engineering. Minho had identified plants with strong fibrous stems, processed them into workable rope, using techniques that seemed like magic to his teammates, then created a mechanical advantage system that let him lift heavy wooden beams 20 feet into the air with minimal effort. Your species possesses remarkable problem-solving adaptations, Kexura noted, analyzing the rope's tensile strength. This material should not be capable of supporting such loads. Humans have always been good at making things work, Minho said, securing another beam in place. We didn't evolve claws or armor or natural weapons. We got curious hands and stubborn brains instead. Above them, the impossible project continued to take shape. What had started as simple tree selection was becoming genuine architecture. Minho worked with an intuitive understanding of structural engineering that amazed his teammates. He could visualize load distribution, calculate stress points, and design solutions for problems that hadn't even occurred yet. The Academy's monitoring drones circled constantly now, their footage being transmitted to increasingly bewildered professors back at the main campus. Faculty meetings were being called to discuss whether intervention was necessary. The examination parameters assume basic shelter construction, reported Dean Velach to the emergency assembly. They never anticipated permanent architecture. Is he violating any specific regulations? Asked the head of xenobiology studies. Technically, no. The rules specify survival using basic tools. They say nothing about the complexity of what can be built with those tools. Meanwhile, in the forest, Minho added another level to his growing structure. The treehouse, because that's clearly what it was becoming now, featured multiple rooms connected by a central platform. Each room had a specific purpose: sleeping area, food storage, workspace, even a covered area where Bora-7 could refill her mobility suit from collected rainwater. The defensive positioning is strategically excellent, Bora-7 observed. Elevated position provides visual advantage, multiple escape routes, protection from ground-based threats, and the roof design will channel rainwater directly into our collection system, Kexara added, their analytical mind appreciating the integrated engineering. Though I still cannot comprehend how you visualized the entire structure before beginning construction. Minho smiled, adding wooden pegs that would serve as handholds on the rope ladder. I didn't visualize all of it. I just started with what I knew would work, then built on that. Humans are good at iterative improvement. Other teams occasionally send scouts to observe Team 7's progress. What they saw defied everything they understood about survival examinations. While they struggled to maintain basic fires and keep their simple shelters from collapsing, the human was casually constructing what looked like a permanent dwelling. How is this possible? Whispered a Venusian student to their teammate. Our survival simulations never prepared us for anything like this. Perhaps, replied their partner thoughtfully. That is because our simulations were designed by species who think of survival as endurance rather than engineering. As the second night approached, Minho stood back to admire his work. The tree rose majestically among the oak branches, a testament to human ingenuity and the stubborn refusal to accept that survival had to mean suffering. His teammates looked up at their new home with something approaching awe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they would sleep in comfort, protected from weather and predators, in a structure that would have impressed architects back on any civilized world. Somewhere on Earth, Minho thought. His grandfather was probably laughing. The second day brought the first real test of every team's survival skills. Dark clouds rolled in from the western mountains, and by noon, rain was falling steadily across the forest. Most teams huddled miserably in their failing shelters, watching water drip through gaps in hastily constructed lean-TOS. Team 7 sat comfortably in their elevated treehouse, listening to rain patter harmlessly on the engineered roof above their heads. The water collection system is performing beyond optimal parameters, Bora 7 reported from her mobility suit, which was now connected to a steady stream of filtered rainwater flowing through Minho's gutter system. I can maintain full hydration indefinitely with this setup. Kexara's crystalline structure had stopped showing stress fractures entirely. The treehouse's controlled environment protected them from the humidity that had been slowly damaging their mineral matrix. I confess, human Minho, when you began this construction, I calculated a high probability of structural failure. Minho smiled, adding another wooden shutter to protect their main living area from wind-driven rain. Humans don't usually build things that fall down. Bad for survival. Through the forest, they could see other teams struggling desperately. Team 3's shelter had collapsed completely, forcing them to rebuild in the mud. Team 5 was attempting to relocate to higher ground, carrying their few supplies through the downpour. Team 12 had managed to keep their fort standing, but it was clearly flooding. The treehouse, meanwhile, had become a masterpiece of wilderness engineering. Minho had spent the morning adding finishing touches that elevated it from simple shelter to genuine architecture. Wooden shutters could be closed against storm winds or opened for ventilation. Interior platforms provided dry storage for food and equipment. A rope-hand pulley system allowed easy transport of materials from ground level. The Academy monitoring stations are transmitting constant updates, Boro 7 observed, tracking communication frequencies. Faculty analysis indicates significant debate about examination parameters. Are we breaking rules? Minho asked, weaving flexible branches into a wall panel that would provide privacy while allowing airflow. The regulations specify only that candidates must survive using basic tools. Kexara replied, analyzing the legal framework. They contain no restrictions on construction complexity or architectural innovation. Minho nodded, returning to his work. He had discovered that the alien would responded differently than Earth trees, requiring slight modifications to traditional joinery techniques. But the principles remained the same. Understand your materials, respect structural forces, build something that will last. The Academy's emergency faculty meeting convened again, as afternoon reports arrived. Dean Velich projected the latest surveillance footage, showing Minho's impossible treehouse in stunning detail. The structure now contains 6 separate rooms, reported the head of engineering studies. Load-bearing calculations indicate it could support the weight of 20 humanoid beings. The roof system provides complete weather protection, while channeling rainwater into a sophisticated collection network. And this was built by one student using only the standard survival kit, asked the xenobiology professor. Correct? Knife, multi-tool, rope, and fire starter. Nothing else. The room fell silent as they watched footage of Minho installing what appeared to be actual furniture, chairs, a table, storage compartments, all crafted from forest materials with techniques that seemed impossible given the tools available. Perhaps, suggested the dean slowly, we need to reconsider our understanding of what basic survival means for different species. Back in the forest, Minho completed the final major addition to their treehouse, a covered workshop area where he could continue crafting improvements while staying dry. The structure now resembled something between a wilderness cabin and a luxury camping facility. The defensive positioning continues to provide tactical advantages, Bora-7 noted, using her elevated vantage point to monitor other teams' progress. Ground-based predators would find access extremely difficult, while we maintain clear sight lines in all directions, and the elevated position protects us from flood risks, Kexara added, watching water pool in the low areas between trees. Your grandfather's teaching methods appear remarkably comprehensive. Minho laughed, putting the finishing touches on a rope ladder that would serve as their primary access route. He always said, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. Saves work later. As evening approached, other teams made difficult decisions. Team 9 activated their emergency beacon after their shelter flooded completely. Team 15 followed suit when one member developed hypothermia from constant exposure to cold rain. The elimination rate was climbing as students discovered that basic survival was harder than their training simulations had suggested. Team 7, however, was thriving. They had dry sleeping areas, protected food storage, unlimited clean water, and enough structural stability to weather any storm the planet might throw at them. Minho had even crafted simple games and puzzles to help pass the time entertainment, carved from wood scraps during breaks in construction. The other candidates appear to view survival as an endurance challenge, Bora-7 observed, watching distant teams through the rain. You treat it as an engineering opportunity. Different approaches, Minho agreed, adding oil from rendered animal fat to waterproof a joint. Most species adapt to their environment. Humans adapt their environment to themselves. As night fell, and the storm intensified, the treehouse stood solid and secure among the swaying branches. Inside, 3 very different beings from 3 different worlds sat comfortably around a small fire, sharing stories and planning improvements for tomorrow. The impossible had become routine, and they still had one more day to go. The final morning dawned clear and bright across Kepler, for 4 to see. Academy search teams, prepared for the standard extraction routine, collecting exhausted students from minimal shelters, treating dehydration and exposure cases, and documenting the predictable pattern of basic survival that had remained unchanged for centuries. Team 7 woke up in comfortable beds. Minho had spent the previous evening crafting actual mattresses from woven plant fibers and soft moss, complete with wooden bed frames that kept them elevated and dry. Kexara stretched their crystalline limbs in the controlled humidity environment, their structure now completely healed from the initial stress damage. Bora-7 emerged from her mobility suit refreshed, having spent the night connected to their unlimited clean water supply. Morning exercise time, Minho announced cheerfully, sliding down the rope ladder to begin his daily routine, while other teams would be struggling to restart dampened fires and choking down their last emergency rations. He was doing push-ups in the forest clearing above him. The treehouse stood like a monument to human ingenuity. What had started as a simple survival shelter had evolved into something that belonged in an architecture museum. 6 interconnected rooms surrounded a central platform, each serving a specific purpose. Rainwater collection systems fed into storage containers crafted from hollowed wood. Windows could be opened or shuttered depending on weather conditions. A workshop area contained tools and materials for ongoing improvements. The Academy transport ships are approaching, Bora-7 reported, monitoring official communications. Extraction teams expect to find standard survival scenarios. They're going to be disappointed, Minho laughed, climbing back up to join his teammates for breakfast. Not emergency rations, but actual cooked food, fish caught from the stream using traps he had woven from flexible branches, plus edible plants he had identified and tested for safety. Kexara analyzed the nutritional content with their built-in sensors. This meal provides superior sustenance compared to standard emergency provisions. How did you acquire such extensive botanical knowledge? Camping with grandfather, Minho replied, the same answer he had given for dozens of seemingly impossible skills over the past 3 days. Humans share information across generations. What works gets passed down. The first Academy search team materialized in their clearing just before noon. The three officers stood frozen, staring upward at the impossible structure rising through the forest canopy. Candidate identification required, the lead examiner managed, consulting his tablet with obvious confusion. Team 7, correct? That's us, Minho called down cheerfully from the treehouse's main platform. Ready for pickup whenever you are. The examiners exchanged glances. In 400 years of Academy survival testing, no student had ever called down casual greetings from a multi-story dwelling they had constructed during the examination period. Please descend for standard post-examination procedures. The lead examiner requested, though his voice suggested he was operating far outside normal protocols. Minho slid down the rope ladder with practiced ease, followed by his teammates. The examiners walked slowly around the treehouse's base, documenting structural details that defied everything they understood about wilderness survival. Candidate Kim, the chief examiner, said carefully, reading from his tablet, "Examination. Parameters specify basic shelter construction using provided tools. This appears to exceed those guidelines." "Did we break any rules?" Minho asked, genuinely curious. The examiner scrolled through regulations, searching for violations. The rules specify survival, using basic tools only. No advanced technology. No outside assistance. He looked up at the treehouse again. They contain no restrictions on architectural complexity. So we passed. A long pause. Other teams were being extracted across the forest, cold, hungry, exhausted students who had barely endured their 3-day ordeal. Meanwhile, Team 7 looked like they had spent a relaxing weekend at a luxury resort. "You didn't just pass," the examiner finally said. "You've redefined what survival means." Academy transport ships buzzed with activity as news spread through the fleet. Professors abandoned their other duties to examine footage of the impossible treehouse. Engineering faculty requested detailed structural analysis. The xenanthropology department demanded immediate interviews with the human student who had somehow built permanent architecture using Stone Age tools. "The construction demonstrates principles we assumed were impossible without industrial technology," reported the head of engineering to an emergency faculty assembly. "Load distribution, environmental integration, resource optimization, all achieved through techniques our databases classify as primitive." Dean Velichus studied the footage with growing amazement. "Perhaps our understanding of primitive requires revision." Back on the transport ship, Minho sat quietly while medical teams conducted standard post-examination health checks. His teammates were already being interviewed by amazed professors who wanted to understand every detail of their unprecedented experience. The human's approach differs fundamentally from standard survival methodology, Kexera explained to a gathering of xenobiology experts. While most species adapt to environmental challenges, humans adapt environments to their requirements. The psychological impact was equally significant, Borisevin added. Rather than enduring hardship, we lived comfortably. This transformed the examination from an ordeal into an engaging project. Minho smiled as he overheard their interviews. His teammates had learned something important during their 3 days together, that survival wasn't about suffering through difficult conditions, but about applying intelligence and creativity to overcome challenges. The treehouse itself was preserved as a permanent monument, designated as Academy Historical Site 1247. Future survival courses would include mandatory study of human engineering techniques, and examination parameters were revised to account for species with construction capabilities. As their transport ship headed back to the Academy, Minho looked out at the green planet falling away below them. Somewhere in that forest, his impossible treehouse stood among the trees. Proof that sometimes the best way to survive is to build something amazing. His grandfather would definitely be proud.